I'm Tai Landrum. I'm the director of the yoga workshop in Boulder, Colorado. I'm a student of Richard Freeman, who founded the yoga workshop in 1987, so almost 30 years ago. And I direct the studio now, and I teach Ashtanga around the world.
Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
For coming at Yoga in Salento.
It's been lovely.
One of the themes you covered this week, which is a very interesting topic, also your background. You have a philosophy background. You have a PhD in philosophy.
I do.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I started graduate school and in philosophy and the PhD program in yoga at about the same time. I discovered yoga philosophy, much later than I started studying these figures. And what I was really struck by was that in yoga philosophy I found a language for discussing elements of human experience that I was interested in and that I think I was trying to connect with in studying Western philosophy. And my interest in Western philosophy and my interest in yoga practice and philosophy feels to me like a continuum rather than a break. What I found in the practice of yoga was a sort of technology for helping induce the kinds of experiences and the kinds of developmental pathways that I was studying in Western philosophy. Because when I was studying philosophy in the academic context, I was studying Plato's theory of Eros, and Eros as a sort of vehicle for the ascent of human consciousness from a sort of darkened, confused state to a sort of immediate apprehension of the sort of everyday sublime. And I think that the practice of yoga, at least as it was presented to me, and my first teacher was a student of Richard Freeman's named Jennifer Elliott, and the way that she presented the practice to me, the practice was an invitation to connect with the sublime and ordinary experience right in the present moment. That there wasn't even any kind of long, arduous process that one had to undertake in order to connect with these sort of eternal, sublime elements of reality, that they were sort of immediately present to us, that they were sort of underlying our experience in every moment, and that we could sort of, by yoking our consciousness to our breath, start to experience them directly. And that experience itself unfolded only within a sort of posture toward oneself of deep compassion and also of adoration for everything that is immediately arising, and that's a form of love. And I think that was the element that originally really took me in. Yeah, I found it very beautiful and very exciting, and I still do.
So one of the themes you approached this week was the topic of prana and apana. Can you explain to who doesn't know what those words mean, what they mean, and tell us a little bit about this topic?
Yes. So prana and apana are, they sort of, in the most abstract sense, they represent the forces of creation and dissolution in the universe. And in the context of the human body, these forces of creation and dissolution are reflected in the process of breathing. So prana, which is a sort of creative force, is responsible for inhalation. Prana is fundamentally a sort of movement pattern, and it has a sort of upward and outward branching action. And we experience that sort of upward and outward branching action physiologically when we take a deep breath in. We feel it in the lifting of the rib cage, the expansion of the heart, the rolling back of the collarbones. There's a sense mentally of being sort of uplifted, of our attention being drawn up, of being more awake in that moment of the breath. Apana is the sort of dissolving force, and physiologically it's responsible for pushing things out of the body. So it's responsible for exhalation in the context of breath, but it's also responsible for the peristaltic movement of the gut and for the contractions of the uterus in child labor. So it sort of has a downward, inward, contractive energy, and it squeezes things out. And in the breathing process, we can feel this as the sort of dropping and gathering of sensation toward the pelvic floor, which naturally contracts every time we exhale. There's a sort of large piece of Hatha Yoga, which is fundamentally concerned with working with prana and apana, so working with breath in order to induce meditative states of mind, or more sort of receptive, vibrant states of mind. In the Hatha Yoga tradition, there are countless techniques for trying to activate the energies of prana and apana simultaneously so that we experience them arising simultaneously, and with the effect that the sort of, the formations of our minds are dissolving just as soon as they're forming. So instead of sort of grasping onto them or being distracted out of the present moment by holding on to a particular thought form and then teasing out its consequences in linear thought, when prana and apana come into balance, we just sort of allow our thoughts to open, to unfold, and then to dissolve. And so by keeping apana fully active, even as prana sort of oscillates, we sort of give ourselves space. We give our mind space to unfold. And we just experience that unfolding from a sort of freer, more easeful state.
And applying this topic to the asanas?
Yeah, so there are a number of ways in which we work to balance prana and apana in the asana practice. The most obvious is just in the outward forms, in the way that we move. So the Ashtanga practice is all built around a movement pattern called Surya Namaskar A, the sun salutations. And the sun salutations are a sort of oscillation of pranic and apanic forms. So the pranic forms are the ones where we're sort of reaching up and out, and the apanic forms are the ones where we're coming down and squeezing in. And there's a rhythmic oscillation between pranic and apanic forms as we move through Surya Namaskar A. And we begin the practice, of course, in Surya Namaskar A to sort of establish that rhythm. And then the whole practice sort of unfolds as if each individual posture were taking place within a unique instance of Surya Namaskar. And so we do a posture maybe on one side, we release, we do a piece of Surya Namaskar, we jump back through, we do the other side, we release, we do another piece of Surya Namaskar. And so we're oscillating between these pranic and apanic forms in order to sort of liberate the movements of prana and apana in our own bodies. There are more subtle ways also of working with prana and apana, like in the context of the bandhas and internal mudras. But the bandhas, just to give an example, so I had said that one of the seed points of apana is in the pelvic floor. The pelvic floor naturally contracts every time we exhale. So this is an important piece of the apana pattern. And what we learn to do with lots of practice is to hold the tone that naturally forms when we exhale, sort of constantly. So we hold the tone in the pelvic floor even as we inhale, and then we keep it held as we exhale, we keep it held as we inhale. This activates the apana pattern continuously, even as we're moving through the practice. And by keeping the activation of apana continuous, we're sort of keeping this energy of dissolution or of letting go active. So then as we twist and we turn and we fold and we bend, and we trigger these different sort of latent, thoughts and memories that are, in some sense, hidden in our tissues. We are already in a place of being prepared to let them go just as soon as they present themselves to us. So it's also through the practice of mula bandha that we activate the apana pattern in order to sort of give the mind more space to unfold without disturbing us by what comes up.
And the connection with the grounding?
So apana is a grounding force. It's a sort of downward force that predominates in the lower half of the body. Its seed point, being in the pelvic floor, is sort of connected with the earth element in the body. So, and the earth is ultimately, the place to which everything returns. It's the place to which, when we release our thoughts, when we release our emotions, they return in some sense to, areas of the body that are associated with the earth element, down through our feet, for example. And so the Ashtanga practice, I think more so than any other form of popular yoga, really emphasizes in the very beginning of the practice the stimulation, the cultivation of the awakening of the aponic force. And the intelligence behind this is that unless the aponic force is really strong, unless it's really been cultivated so that it's really active, then we can be easily emotionally, psychologically disturbed by the various experiences that we can trigger by twisting our bodies very deeply, moving our spines, bends and folds very deeply. Because as every Ashtanga practitioner knows, it doesn't take very long for the practice to sort of trigger the latent memories and thoughts and, subtly repressed feelings just through these combinations of breath and movement. And if apana is really strong, then we can re-experience those psychical phenomena in a way that is easeful and peaceful, and we can reestablish our relationships with those things, and in some cases even just let them go entirely and sort of lighten ourselves of their burden through the releasing action of apana.
One last question I would like to ask. For us yogis, that we are like in a path of self-inquiry and self-study, what do you think is our role in society when we recognize the faults of society? The thin line between the indifference of what's going on and getting involved. What could be a yogic way of getting involved? And if there is such a thing as a yoga community, what should we do as a responsibility as this yoga community?
Yeah, I think that yoga teaches us to reconnect with our spontaneity and to start to act from a place that is sort of more less reactive, less rule-bound, less ideological, and to start to act from a place that's more heart-centered, more passionate, more spontaneous. And I think that what's important is that the action is being undertaken spontaneously and from a place that's fully heart-centered, because when that happens, the action is much more potent and powerful and more authentic. And I think that's all we really need in this world, is to act from a more heart-centered place, because I think that when we act from a heart-centered place, we avoid entering into the kinds of relationships that involve the subjugation and the, willful infliction of suffering on others. It's been a pleasure to be here. It's such a lovely center. I'm looking forward to returning.
We're looking forward to having you back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Тай.